Hello and welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. I'm Chris Whiteman. Thanks for joining me. Today's lesson is part one of a series where we're going to be looking at a process to develop bebop vocabulary. So when I first got interested in jazz guitar roughly 30 years ago, I did not have access to a good teacher. Anytime I asked for some guidance from a jazz musician that I respected, the consensus was, you need to transcribe. So I kept hearing this message from everyone. Transcribe. You want to learn how to play jazz? Transcribe. So that's what I started to do. I just dove in. It was not an easy process. It took a tremendous amount of time. But, I did develop some very important skill sets. So there was tremendous value in transcribing in terms of developing my ears, by painstakingly, figuring out every note in a solo. I was spending a lot of time doing this, so I was immersing myself in this language. So listening a lot was very important. I was notating when I was transcribing in standard notation, so I had to learn about this very complex rhythmic language that was happening. And after I transcribed something, then I would focus on playing along with the recording. So I was really getting an opportunity to play along with a master. And that was really helping develop my time feel, as well as some of the finer details of articulation and tone. All of those were kind of organically getting developed through this process. I eventually got to the point where I could play along with the transcription up to tempo, and it sounded pretty good. The challenge was, once I left a transcription and went to improvise on my own, I realized I didn't have a vocabulary to draw from. And this is because transcribing, playing along with a recording, while tremendously valuable, it doesn't automatically translate to you having vocabulary that you can access. We need to add some additional steps to make sure that you really get the full value out of the transcription process. The main reason that I wasn't integrating vocabulary from transcription into my improvisation was because I didn't fully understand what was going on in the transcription. And to give you an analogy, if I was not an English speaker, if I was not a native English speaker, but I started watching an American movie and I watched it over and over, and I practiced the lines from the movie, I may get to a point where I can actually recite the lines and sound pretty good. My enunciation could be pretty good, but I wouldn't say I spoke English, right? If someone asked me a question, I wouldn't be able to respond. So mimicking alone doesn't really equate to having an understanding and ability to have fluency in a language. So what I want to share today is a process for building bebop vocabulary, or any vocabulary for that matter, that really prioritizes the understanding of the content and builds the fundamentals so that you can become fluent in this language. So I've put together 7 steps. We're going to cover the first 5 today, and we'll hit the rest in part 2. So step 1 is we want to identify vocabulary that we want, right? So this is important. You don't want to waste your time transcribing something that, doesn't speak to you or you don't find aesthetically pleasing. And we're going to go for a single phrase. A lot of times people begin transcribing large amounts of content. That's like putting too much food on your plate. You're not going to be able to digest it. It becomes a waste. So we're going to start with a single phrase. And I recommend that you go to an authentic source for your vocabulary. So if we're working on bebop, go to some of the pioneers. Go to Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Dizzy Gillespie, someone that's a true authority on the subject. Step 2 is the act of transcribing. So sitting down and actually figuring out the phrase note by note, as well as what the underlying harmony is at that point. Now, if this is a skill set that is beyond your capacity at this point, then go to a transcription that's published. Get the Charlie Parker Omnibook. There's so much vocabulary in there. So nothing wrong with using somebody else's transcription in the early stages of this. You just want to make sure that it's accurate. And as your skill sets develop and you get the capacity to do your own transcriptions, that's going to be even better. Step 3 is going to be doing a thorough analysis. So you want to look at how the phrase lays out rhythmically and how it lays against the harmony. So the harmonic analysis will be numerical. Like that's the 5th of the chord to the 9th of the chord, etc. Step 3 is also going to encompass a visual imagery. So I want to see how the line lays over maybe a chord voicing on the guitar. And I also like to sing the line at this stage as well, so that I know that I'm really hearing it and it's not just muscle memory. After I've done a thorough analysis and understand what I'm playing, then I really want to work on reflexing it. And this is all about repetition. And most people underestimate the number of times you need to repeat something until it's reflexed. This can be many hours, particularly in the early development, because we don't have a fundamental technique already established. It gets faster and faster, the more you do it. But the repetition is key to building that reflex. We want to be able to execute the phrase without thinking at all. Modern neuroscience says 90 days of repeated activity before the neural network is developed. So you can think about anything new as being quite fragile until you've done it on a daily basis for 3 months, really. Now, the more you do this, the more neural network infrastructure you're building, and the process in the future becomes much faster. So after I've reflexed it, then I move to step 5. So step 5 is a really important step, and that is taking the phrase through all 12 keys. Because we don't want to be limited in our ability to utilize this phrase only in the context that we learned it, right? We want to be able to use this anytime we have the opportunity, no matter what the key is. And then in part 2, we're going to look at step 6 and step 7. So step 6 is going to be extracting the phrase from the original context and then reapplying it to different tunes. So really building that ability to find the opportunity to repurpose this vocabulary. And then in step 7, we're going to look at ways to personalize the vocabulary. So we're going to take the phrase that we transcribed and we're going to begin to manipulate it or personalize it so that we change it a little bit. And this is a big part of improvisation. So when we think about improv, there's a misconception that it's this totally spontaneous, thing that happens. We just make stuff up. I'm speaking to you right now. I don't have a script, so I'm improvising within the English language, right, to express myself. But I'm really using the fundamental aspects of the English language. Otherwise, you wouldn't understand what I'm saying, right? So I'm using sentence structure. We have an alphabet, we have words, we have phrases. I have to, stay within the parameters of the English language if I want other people to understand me. But because I have fluency in this language and an understanding of the fundamentals, at the moment of conception of an idea, I'm able to verbalize and express it. And the same thing happens in improvisation, right? I get an idea, and at that moment, I'm able to express it musically. But I'm not making up a completely new language. I'm not making up new words. I'm really composing something within the structures of a language. I'm really just rearranging and reorganizing the components of this language in the moment. And so if you think about improvisation more as spontaneous composition, if we want to get good at that in real time, we have to get good at that, when we're not under the pressure of, a tempo, making the changes. So step 7 is a really important skill set, because this really is at the heart of improvisation, right? Our ability to manipulate something and create something new within the context of an established language. And so we'll take a phrase and look at different ways to manipulate that in part 2. So let's jump into today's lesson. So step 1, we are going to find a phrase that we like. I'm going to choose a phrase that I like. I have chosen a 2-5-1 phrase from Donna Lee. All right, so we're going to a bebop master, Charlie Parker. I know some people think that Miles Davis wrote this. I don't know, maybe he did. This phrase starts on bar 15, goes through 16 and into measure 17. It's a 2-5 over B flat minor, E flat 7, A flat major 7. So step 2 is we're going to transcribe this phrase. I've already done that for you. So I'm going to show you the phrase. That phrase sounds like this. So what I want to do now is do a thorough analysis of this phrase. Rhythmically, this is a pretty simple phrase. It's basically a 2-measure phrase with a resolution on beat 1 of the 3rd measure. Let's look at the first measure of this phrase. So it's over a B flat minor 7. I like to play the voicing on the guitar. So I'm going to play B flat minor 7 here at the 6th fret. And I want to place the phrase so that it falls around this visual of this chord shape. So I'm really building the relationship between my voicing and then the single notes of this phrase. And so this phrase starts on E flat, and in relation to the B flat minor 7 chord, that is the 11th, right? So it goes from the 11th to the minor 3rd, and then it jumps down to the 5th, which is F. A flat is my flat 7 to my 9, right? And if we look at that much, I'm seeing, well, here's my B flat minor. I'm starting a whole step above the 3rd, right? So the minor 3rd there, that is such a important chord tone, right? The 3rd and the 7th are really important tones. So I see that as a pillar, harmonically here. And I say, oh, I'm starting a whole step above that and then moving into it, right? And then I come down to the 5th, up to the flat 7th, to the 9th. And if I look at those 3 notes, I see, well, it's a triad. This is a little organizational principle. By seeing it as a triad, I've just grouped 3 notes together. So that's going to help me memorize that, right? So I'm starting a whole note above the minor 3rd. So I'm into the 3rd, and then I go down to the 5th, and I play a minor triad, right? Right. So 11, flat 3rd, 5th, flat 7th, 9th, back to the root, down to the 5th, and then up to the flat 7th. And that is 8 eighth notes all around B flat minor 7. What happens is we start to process information in chunks, right? So I'm not seeing this as a group of individual notes anymore. I'm starting to see a shape emerge in this line. So I'm targeting the 3rd, starting a whole step above, moving down to the 5th, and now that's a minor triad. I go back to the root, back to the 5th, to the flat 7th, right? So I can extract this, and this is, a B flat Dorian idea. I can move it around. Right. So that's like a word now, right? So I have B flat minor. Here's my alphabet. Each note is, a letter, and then you put it all together and we get a word. Right? So that's like my Dorian word, right? Now, next measure, we move into E flat 7, and the phrase there goes like this. So here's my E flat 7. This starts on the 3rd, and it moves up the arpeggio. I go 3, 5, flat 7, back to the 5th. All right, so that's a pretty simple idea. I'm just using the arpeggio, 3, 5, flat 7, 5. Now, there's no alteration there. That's the lower structure of a dominant 7th. The second half of this measure targets the altered 9. So it's the flat 9 to the sharp 9, back to the flat 9. And the rhythm there is a triplet, right? So we have this, 2, 3, 4. And visually, we see the E flat 7 shell voicing for the first half of that measure. And then when we get the 9s, I'm looking at E flat 7, sharp 9, flat 9. I'm seeing those extensions because that's what's being expressed in the line. And then it moves down to the root and to the flat 7 before resolving to the 3rd of A flat major 7, right? So over the E flat 7, we get this. Right, so that's my word for the E flat 7. So I have a word for B flat minor, and then a word for E flat 7. Or we could say two different words. So we have a non-altered word for the first half of E flat 7, and then we have a second word for the second half of that phrase. And then we resolve to A flat major 7 to the 3rd there, and that's kind of our punctuation. We're done. So we kind of have a phrase now built of, let's say, 3 words and a punctuation. So the first word falls over B flat minor 7. And then the second word is E flat 7, right? And then we have a little bit of an altered idea, which is our 3rd word, and then a punctuation at our resolution into the 3rd of A flat major 7, right? And that's our phrase. Now, step 4 is all about reflexing. So this is where there's going to be a tremendous amount of repetition of this idea. You can do it a cappella. I'd also recommend doing it with a metronome. I'm going to pull up iRow Pro and use a 251 backing track for the 251 in A flat and just play it over and over. I would recommend changing the tempo. So here's 100. Right. I did it at 100. Here's 160. And find your upper limit. And that becomes something to work with over time. See if you can gradually increase that. And then after I feel like I have it reflexed in the original key, then I want to take it and I want to move it through all 12 keys. And when I do this, I often will need to find another fingering position, right? So if I start this idea with a 251 that starts on the 6th string root, I get one fingering pattern, but if I were to do that off the 5th string root, I would need a different fingering pattern. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take our phrase from Donna Lee, and I'm going to move it through all 12 keys, moving through the cycle of fourths. So we're going to move key centers up a perfect fourth every time. And we're going to start in the key of C. And I'm going to do a fast version and then a slow version. Okay, I hope this gives you a step-by-step process that you can use as you transcribe. I'm going to follow up and hit the last 2 steps in part 2. Everything we went over today is on a PDF download with tab and standard notation, as well as a fast and slow backing track to take this phrase through all 12 keys. And that's available to my Patreon subscribers. And there's a link in the description of this video if you're interested in looking at that. And there's a link in the description of this video for those that are interested in signing up for my Patreon page. I hope you found this information useful. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.